Hello and welcome to a conversation with myself, Michael Rawlinson, Director of Synergy Health, and Jonny Ashton, producer, writer, and director of the Channel 4 highly acclaimed documentary, Channel 4 documentary of Will Young losing my twin Rupert, which is the story of his twin brother and his relationship with active addiction, and which eventually cost him his life. Jonny, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So maybe we could start by talking a little bit about what attracted you to this project in the first place.
Well, I've always been interested in telling the stories around addiction or recovery from addiction, but it's not something I'd had the opportunity to do yet within TV documentaries.
Right.
And I think it stems from back when I went to university. As part of my psychology degree, I had to do a work placement, and I chose to do a work placement at a drug and alcohol rehabilitation centre in Salford, and it had a huge impact on me, and it was just something that really stuck with me, and it was something that I thought I'd like to tell stories about that at some point in the future, but this was the right opportunity, I guess. And as part of that sort of the way these productions crew up, you have a production company will pitch their idea to the channel, and then once they get the sign off, they'll find the right people for that job. And this was an idea Will had. He'd gone to Wall and said that I'd like to make this documentary, and I wasn't involved in the process yet. And then at some point they looked for a team, they looked for a director, and when they reached out to me, it sounded like an interesting story already. But then as part of that recruitment process, I guess I also had a conversation with Will over Zoom, and hearing the story firsthand from him, it was just incredibly compelling. But also it was that idea that you see this person on your screen or on stage, or, you know, we all remember him from Pop Idol, but you had no idea everything that was going on in the background. And yet it was also a story that it was going to speak to so many people, because there must be so many other people going through this. So hearing from him firsthand was very compelling.
So it sounds like his authenticity, which comes across hugely in the film, was a really important part of that initial contact for you.
Yeah, I mean, Will's a huge mental health advocate. He's done a lot of work over the years on himself in terms of his own mental health, and I think that really shows in a really positive way. I think all of that work allows him to articulate himself incredibly well in a way that I think a lot of people might struggle to articulate themselves if they haven't gone through whether it's therapy or other sort of work on yourself. And so the way he was able to talk about things was really genuine.
Right. So thank you. Yes, as I said, it comes across so powerfully. Please maybe talk a little bit about what it was like, the actual production of this, putting the documentary together, and the of getting the number of contributors that you asked to contribute to the documentary. Please talk a bit. What was that like for you in the sort of construction of the documentary?
Yeah, so first it started off with, I'd met Will and then started doing research. And originally it was the sort of original pitch, I guess, was focused on addiction and family members of those in the addicted community. And then as we started making it, it became clear that just as much as the film would be about addiction, it would also be about grief, and it would effectively be a portrait of grief. And I think that's a sort of a good example of the creative process. You don't have all the answers at the beginning. you sort of start chipping away, and then the form starts to appear as you start to sort of find answers to some things, get dead ends on other things, and so we had Will, and then I went to meet his parents, and they're not people that particularly court the media, and they haven't done a huge amount of media, but once they realised the sort of intentions of the documentary, and that this would help give a voice to people in a similar position, they were keen to help as well. And then we decided, we also, you're trying to work out, is this going to be a story just told through Will and his family? Is it going to be told through people that knew Rupert, or are you also going to look at external stories as well? Are you going to have other stories that might almost mirror Will and Rupert's story and their family story? And we started to explore that route as well. And so as part of it, I was really keen that at this point, it was myself and Claire, who's the assistant producer, who are doing a lot of the casting, and we're also supported by amazing exec Colette. And we're speaking to different charities and finding things out, basically. And the charities were really helpful. They were putting us in contact with other charities who were saying, oh, why don't you speak to such and such? And then they were also putting us in touch with people who had real life experiences of addiction, either in their own lives or a family member. And that was a really important part of the process for us in terms of understanding more and more about it. And that research, it was research for us, but it was also sort of the start of the casting process, although it was a huge part of it was just trying to sort of learn as much as we could in as short a space of time as we had.
So I think one of the most effective contributors comes towards the end of the documentary, and Natalie Needham and her remarkable project, but the connection between the two, her and Will, the two family members who'd suffered a family member in active addiction, was remarkable. And I wondered when you saw this happening, this moment between the two of them, I wondered what that was like.
I mean, it's such a special scene in the art gallery, and I feel emotional every time I watch that scene. But in the moment, in the moment at the end when Will reveals his square, it was, even though you're filming it and you've got to do a job, it was still quite emotional. And they had a really special connection, and Will had a great connection with everyone that we filmed with. But there is something about when there's a shared experience, that it gives people something to connect with. And I know Natalie she hadn't been filmed before. She knew Will off the TV. She likes his music, remembers him from Pop Idol, and so she's going to be meeting someone that she really respects. And she told us she was nervous beforehand, but then as soon as she met him and she's on screen, you would have absolutely no idea, because everything else just sort of melted away, and they just had that connection between each other and their shared experience. And the other really lovely moment within that is when Will shares his own experiences after Natalie's talked about how awful it was having to kick her, make her dad homeless, in her words. Will then talks about his own experiences with Rupert, and he says, the last thing I ever did was hit my brother, and I don't regret it. And it's a really, it's a moment that if it was taken out of context, and if people didn't know those sorts of situations, would people might not be able to understand, but by the time it's reached this point in the film, and also because they have that shared experience and shared knowledge, they understand each other. And Natalie talks about it's such a relief to be able to hear someone talk about those feelings, because living with and loving someone who has addiction, there's a whole range of emotions, from anger to guilt. And I remember Natalie saying to us in our research period that the more you know about addiction, almost the more guilt you can feel as well, because you realise that it's not just about, you know, self-control. There are so many other things going on, and it is an illness. And so I think that was a really important moment within the film.
I completely agree. And talking about that, I sensed that the film was really well received, simply from the ratings and its continuance on More Fool right now. What sort of feedback did you have post broadcast and after the film was released?
The feedback has been amazing, really. I've not had a response like that to a film I've worked on before, just in terms of the sheer volume of messages I was getting from members of the public, but also people I know, and, you know, people I knew 10, even 20 years ago, who reached out just to say that the film had affected them, and, you know, many of them saying because it's an issue that affects their family. You know, there's someone in their family who may either have addiction at the minute, or they've lived through that experience. And I think there was a comfort to be found in realizing that there were so many other people out there, because, you know, as Will talks about in the film, people don't like to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jonny, thank you very much indeed for sharing some of your insights today about this quite remarkable documentary. And for those watching this film, if they would like to see the film, if you click on the link that goes to All Four, you'll be able to see Will Young losing my twin Rupert, and which I recommend. So, Jonny Ashton, producer, writer, director, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.